Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Hi, this is Gracie Howes with Pilma. Let's hit pause for just a second on this episode because I have to tell you about this event that every forward-thinking PI firm should have on their calendar this January. It's the AI for PI Expo in Orlando, Florida, January 15th through 17th. This is the very first conference of its kind dedicated entirely to showing personal injury firms how to harness AI to save time, cut costs, and grow faster. You'll get hands-on demos, practical training, and access to the best AI solutions built for law firms. Reserve your spot now at pilma.org/AI for PI Expo via the link in the show notes.
Hey, it's Jenna, Membership Growth Advisor with Pilma. If you're serious about growing your law firm this year, don't miss your chance to book a free law firm growth strategy session with me. We'll break down what's holding you back, identify the biggest opportunities in your firm, and map out the next steps to accelerate your growth. No pressure, just real strategy and direction tailored to you. Click the link in the show notes to schedule your free session.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we've got a double hitter. We've got Stacie and we've got Eric. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man. So, if you will, introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your journey, kind of your background, and what your superpower is. Okay.
Sure.
So you will start with Eric. We'll start with Stacie then.
Nice. Ladies first.
Thanks. So my career started right out of college. I went to work for an insurance company and was an evil adjuster. I've since switched sides, but I did commercial and personal lines adjusting for about 7 or 8 years. Wasn't looking for a job and got called upon by a law firm to interview for a negotiator position, which was my favorite part of being an adjuster, was negotiating claims. And I wasn't feeling good about being on the insurance side anymore. I felt like I was fighting more to pay than not. So it felt like the right move, and it certainly was. And it started my career in the legal industry. From negotiator, I ended up evolving to managing investigative teams, intake teams, the whole negotiation team, and eventually ended up vice president of operations, where I was in charge of all the practice areas.
Yeah. And how big was that firm?
About 300 people now, I believe. When I started there, it was about 40 or 50 people, I think. So massive growth in my time there, about 20 years.
Right. And Eric?
Yeah. So similar to Stacie, I started outside of the legal space. After the Marine Corps, I went into the ministry for a little bit and then moved out here to North Carolina and started with a firm in Durham at 2000, March 2000. So I was there for about 23 years and kind of did everything from, the first week I was there, came out of pocket $20 for postage because they were several $100,000 in the hole. Did everything from answering phones, doing intake, para-lawyering whenever necessary, doing kind of every job in the firm and watching it grow. Like Stacie, I know I was there when it experienced exponential growth. And one of the big things that we did was we handled one of the largest civil rights class action in U.S. history in Ray Black farmer discrimination litigation. That case settled for $1.25 billion. Was invited to the White House for my work on that case, and that left us capitalized where we started and exited from an intake and case management software company. I have 30 patents related to that. So from operations to kind of legal technology, from really mastering systems related to soft tissue cases all the way up to, a class membership of close to 100,000 people. We've done it all relative to volume. And so a couple of years ago, we started Maestro Strategic Partners, and we just decided, what is it we really enjoyed doing? And it was really working with law firms, kind of problem solving. We deal with everything from, intake to exit and everything in between.
So basically, you were the COO during all that growth, then, right?
Yeah, so I was the CEO. I wore many hats and had many titles. In the early days, I was a COO, and then as the firm grew and it started to scale, the executive team also scaled, and so then we ended up bringing subject matter experts in each lane. Then Stacie became the vice president of operations. There was a vice president of marketing, finance, and that sort of thing. And then I kind of sat at the top as more of a chief of staff role between the firm and between the legal tech company. And so I had effectively for a number of years 2 full-time jobs.
Damn. And I remember the firm you were with, and I remember like they were like, y'all were my nemesis. I mean, you were my biggest competition. And yeah, and it's like me, most lawyers, we like to think that we did it, but really it's the people like you. I had on you that really I couldn't have did it without. I mean, and I think that's real important for lawyers to understand that, you can't do it all by yourself, and really getting good people, especially at the top, that can help you maneuver and grow is, I think it's essential, man. I just think I call it second in command, however you want to say it. There's been books written on it, but to really scale a law firm, you got to have a good executive team, whether it be one person or as you grew, because like you said, you were pulling out money for postage at one time, and then you're sitting there, got 300 employees, and that's a big operation. I know. I mean, I got to 70, and I thought it was a nightmare with that many people that you didn't know everybody that worked there. I mean, you just don't. You can't know it.
Yeah, there were people there for 5 years. I met them at their 5-year anniversary. It was, I mean, seriously, I mean, it was just massive. One of the things on the second in command point, Ken, because I think it's wise counsel to tell your listeners and your mastermind members that, what we want to do is we want to put the visionaries, the principals in their positions of strength, and then allow the non-attorneys, or they could be attorneys, but those professionals who are handling the administration, handle those things that are delegable and allow the principals to focus on those things that are not delegable, like vision. You might need to get out and network. You might need to get out to rainmake. The very best firms we've seen are involved in mastermind groups. They're dedicated to those meetings. They're going to those meetings. They're hearing new ideas. They're hearing different experiences. And then they come back home to the mothership and they talk to their executive team and say, here's this great idea. And the very best executive teams will say, that is a good idea. Here are the challenges in implementing that idea, because not everything works in every jurisdiction. And so sometimes you need to have that voice that pushes back, and one of the things I think that we excel at is speaking truth to power. I mean, one of the reasons we left the firm is that dynamic didn't seem to exist in the way that it had in the early days. And when you start to lose that, you start to end up having an echo chamber. And that's when you start to see success atrophy.
I think the big deal, I never wanted yes people. I mean, I wanted somebody that would challenge me, not be scared of me. You know what I'm saying? I think leaders that are killed a messenger, I don't think they can really take it to the next level. I mean, maybe they can, but I think you got to be able to, you can't know it all. And sometimes you got to defer and listen. I've gone into meetings and had one idea, and then when I walk out of the meeting, I'm completely 180 degrees because they convinced me my thought process was I didn't think about this and that. Because let's be honest, I'm not down there in the trenches. I'm not down there where the sausage is made. Is why I look at it. You got to listen to your frontliners as well, and the people that are getting stuff done. I mean, I still have that problem today at Pilma. I have all these great ideas I think in my head, and half of them are and half of them aren't, But the deal is, I got to have somebody to bounce it off of to set me straight and say, listen, Ken, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Or this is going to be crazy to implement, and we just don't have the manpower. I mean, if you could hire 3 more people, whatever, because that's another thing I see is, and I think you would agree, but you have all the best ideas in the world. If you don't execute, implement, it don't mean nothing. I mean, the deal is it's useless. It's just a pipe dream, right?
Execution is everything. We tell our clients our method is we go in and we get in there and we interview key people in the firm, and then we produce kind of a significant work product at the end with our impressions. And one of the very first things we say to our clients is we don't supply the vision and we don't supply the execution. That's not what we don't go in a cookie cutter mode and say, yes, this is what your law firm, this is how it should be. For example, the firm we were at, that's not for everybody. In fact, it's not for most people. They think that they want to be the big 900, 800 pound gorilla in the market, but often you see margins atrophy, you see problems increase, you see a lot of things that you don't anticipate being the absolute monster firm with all of those people. And some firms don't want to lose that sense of culture. Like you talked about, your firm got to 70. I remember 70 very well. And there were distinct cultural benchmarks that changed at 40 and 70. And then when you get north of 100, you might as well be IBM. I mean, it's very difficult unless you're under one roof.
Yeah. Yeah. And with offshore and all that stuff going on now. So I was going to talk to you about that too, is as you grow, I mean, I've heard this, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that like, when you start, like every time you double the firm, like if you go from 25 to 50 people, you got to kind of re-engineer stuff. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know if it's exact science, but the deal is as you get bigger, you got to re-engineer stuff because things are different.
You do. You can't keep doing things the same way and expecting to evolve. What got you to 30 is not necessarily what's going to get you to 70 or 80 people or beyond that.
I mean, I speak in metaphors a lot, and I think a house is a great metaphor. You get married, you have a kid, and you have a nice little 3-bedroom house, and it's fine. You have 5 more kids, that just doesn't work anymore. And, that's obviously you need to expand the physical location just because you've got more bodies. But the same is true. What we see this, Ken, is we see this in intake systems, where there's still firms out there that have these old intake systems where intake comes in, lead has to be elevated to somebody and somebody has to review it. That doesn't work when you're getting hundreds of leads coming in, because by definition, what do you end up doing? You start to see these hold times, you start to call people back, you start to do all these things that are terrible practices in intake. But because you didn't evolve your system, like Stacie was talking about, you can't grow, you can't innovate. And then you start to see some real negative things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. So what does Maestro, what do you guys actually do? I mean, you said a little bit about it, but get more into it. Like you're like a fractional COO, or you're like a consultant, or you're like a coach. I mean, what do y'all do?
Yeah,
all of the above.
I was going to say all of the above. I mean, I think our most significant engagement is certainly fractional work. And it can be not only a fractional COO, it can be a fractional CSO, a strategy person. It can be fractional marketing to a point. We try to meet firms where they're at. We try to come up with creative ways to help them. We can't be everything to everybody. I would say that some of our more popular work is where it's a hybridization, where you talked about superpowers earlier. In addition to kind of intake and asynchronous teams, one of Stacie's superpower is coaching and mentoring younger managers and developing them. And we've seen a real demand in our services related to that. To the extent that I have a superpower, I'm kind of dangerous in all facets of operations, but it would be legal technology would probably be my superpower. We've worked with corporations, technical companies, ranging from classic case management to AI companies to law firms. An increasing demand on our time is firms want to reach out to us and sit in on vendor meetings and help them select the right vendor, because they're getting kind of out of their depth and they don't understand. AI is such a buzzword now, but there's a lot of snake oil out there, and we talked about this at the last Super Summit, that what's real AI, what's not real AI, and sometimes it gets real murky. And so we're seeing a demand for our involvement there. We have some firms that want to just use us as just in a straight advisory capacity, where we might meet with them monthly and have conversations ranging from attorney compensation to crisis management to kind of growth issues. And sometimes we can speak truth to power in ways that people inside of the tent can't. That's probably one of the unspoken benefits. So we might have a firm that's had a paralegal who's been at the shop for 18, 20 years, and it's just kind of a crotchety curmudgeon and doesn't really want to innovate because we've always done things this way. And it's not politically feasible to make an adjustment there. And so we can get brought in and say, hey, this is a blocker here. And we don't have the same fear of internal retribution that other people would. I'd say that's pretty common, actually, but certainly over the last year.
Well, we see that a lot in the masterminds. We have people saying, she's been with me for 20 years, and it's like she feels like she's indispensable.
Well,
that comes up often. And there's an emotional attachment to someone who's been with you for so long. You've been through a lot of hard times together, good times together, and that loyalty, firm owners want to reward, but they have to recognize if it is holding them back from where they actually want to go. Someone who's going to be a blocker like that to all the innovative ideas and kind of poo-poo it or turn it down, or worse, is just not support it internally. So, they have the staff's ear even more, I think, than firm owners, and they could be blocking initiatives that are super important.
And I'll tell you this, Ken, I think one of the things that really gets conflated in law firms is loyalty and longevity. In a law firm, those things are conflated. She's been here for 20 years and therefore she's loyal. I'd argue the one has nothing to do with the other. If you were paying that person well, which presumably over 20 years, they're going up the pay scale, so they probably are compensated well. But that person is not putting the firm first. That person is not getting on board with growing the firm. That person is only interested in their own personal agenda or their own personal comfort zone. Who is that loyalty to? Is that loyalty to the firm, or is that loyalty to that person having, a comfortable position? I've been in plenty of firms where, we have clients where you've got long-term employees that do the opposite of what is in the best interest of the firm. That's not loyalty. Jack Welch would call that disruptors. Those are people that actually impede the health of the firm, not improve it.
And it's hard to, like you said, that emotional tie. I've seen this time and time again over the years, and sometimes they just have to cut them loose because they can't change them. They feel bad about it while they're doing it, but 3 months down the road, they said, God, I wish I'd done this 2 years ago. It's the morale is so much better. People coming up to me saying, thank you.
Yeah.
It's tough. I've had to do it a couple of times over my life, and it's not fun. I hate it.
It's not fun. I'll tell you though, Ken, it's, the other thing, it's not just a zero-sum game. If you have somebody in that situation, you can also create a scaffolding around them. We call it like an island. We worked, and this is very common, as in litigating firms. You might have a high-performing litigator who's a big earner, but they're just an absolute jerk and really toxic. And so you have to compartmentalize that person if you want to have a thriving and positive culture in the other parts of your firm. Most firms have an appetite for that because of the strong earning potential of the lawyer. The similar philosophy can work with these longer term employees. It just depends on what the firm is valuing and how much tolerance they have for bad behavior. Because if there's reaction or, they're acting out, or something like that, well, then you do have to make that more serious and permanent parting. But I've seen it work the other way, where that person just ends up working remote. You still have access to their subject matter, institutional knowledge. And then you just kind of isolate them and you essentially give them a working retirement in a sense. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but it is a cat that needs to be skinned.
And we can recognize when you have that long-term employee that might still have potential and they really just didn't have anyone to kind of lead them to the next level. A lot of that is their overall attitude and are they adaptable to change? We just have to recognize when that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something you said, what you do, Stacie, is really, and you made a comment, Eric, this middle management is what I call it. It's, I'm not going to say it's the COO, which of course that's great too. And I think they need training too, but that when you're scaling up, I think when you get to about 50, 70, 80, whatever, I don't know. I've heard people say about every 8 people you need a leader, maybe not a manager, but a leader. I don't know if y'all subscribe to that or not, but
yeah, there was this Harvard study in 1947, a neuroscience article that talked about the optimal number of people that a manager should have direct reports. Is 7. EOS, I think, prescribes that number between 6 and 8. So it's generally that number, and that's a major mistake that firms make, is too many roads leading to one person.
Yeah,
and it's it sets that one person up for failure too. Because, they could have been fantastic up to 30 or 40 people, but now we're at 50, 60 people. They can't know everything going on. And so they start to feel kind of that strain and failure. And it's not reasonable to know what 60 people are doing down to the minute, so you really need to consider those, like you said, even if it's not a manager in a kind of a lead role, you need those people under them.
Yeah. Yeah, because you got to be careful. Also, I don't want a firm that's got all Chiefs and no Indians.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a balancing act,
it is.
One of the biggest things I really get upset about, and I don't know, maybe we can talk about how you deal with this, because this is something that I've had to deal with over the years. And you get somebody and they got a job title and you ask them to do something out and they say, well, that's not in my job. That's not my, that's not my job title. I don't do that. Well, that as me as a leader, listen, when I work for other people, I clean the bathroom if that's what they need. You know what the deal is? I mean, I read all these books about over in Japan where these people go in every morning and they clean the place before they start working and all this stuff. And I'm thinking that kind of trains them to be, I don't know. I mean, I like y'all's comment on that.
Yeah, part of it is, defining your culture. Most people don't want a firm like that where people are saying that's not my job, and you just have to build that culture and recognize that's not a good cultural fit for your firm. If anyone has that attitude or literally says the words, just not a good cultural fit. I don't care how good they are at their job, they're going to have a limit.
Yeah, their priority is that this is exactly to the earlier point. This person is more concerned about themselves and their agenda and not firm first. If that person who's at your shop for 20 years, is that a loyal person? I'd say not. And so I'd argue you've got a hiring problem. If you have those people in abundance in your shop, one is one too many, but if you've got one, you probably have multiple. And that's where you have to hire. We're big on you hire for character. I mean, obviously, if you need a professional license, like a lawyer or something, they need obviously to have those base requirements. But, I don't need somebody to have X amount of education. I don't need somebody to have X amount of experience. I need somebody who's got the right skill set as far as their interpersonal skill set, high EQ, high character. And I can do a lot with a person that'll run through a wall, believe you me.
Yeah, I've always looked at aptitude and attitude, because you can train them pretty much to do anything.
Yeah.
I think always all the time, I got to have somebody with experience. I'll be honest with you. I'd rather get somebody that doesn't have any experience, that's got that go get them attitude and got a good rapport, and it's a people person. I think it's Lencioni calls it the A player. You got to be humble, but aggressive, and you got to be a people person, can get along with people, talk to people, communicate. Call it emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it. You got to have hungry for growth, not just for money, but to grow personally and professionally. And if I can find somebody like that, I can mold them. Which really, I think the jobs of the leaders and the management is to try to coach these other people up.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I think that's your main job. I think an owner's main job, I need to be coaching up these people that I can. And also, I need to be listening to the clients. I just had a call this morning with one of my members at Pilma, and he had a problem. And he said, I don't want to be bitching. I said, you're not bitching. I said, I can't fix stuff. I can't make it better if I don't know. You know what I'm saying? How could I? But you got to be the pulse. You got to figure out the pulse of your firm and the pulse of the clientele, and what they want and what they like, what they don't like, and what you can do. I think that's your job as a leader to do that. And I think that's a lot of lawyers get that wrong. I really believe.
And I think you're right. We wrote a book, Invested Leadership, and one of the premises of invested leadership, I mean, a core premise, is to have self-awareness and know what you're good at and what you're not good at as a leader. And so, like you talked about, like coaching up your people, you're good at it. But let's say there's somebody who's not, that they're just kind of a super introvert, really focused, and they're good for the institution as far as the runway and the vision where the institution goes, but their EQ is very low, or they're narcissistic or something, they'd be a terrible coach. And so what you do in that instance is you surround yourself with people or third parties that, can facilitate that coaching to develop your team. This morning, I try to read 20, 30 minutes every morning on, different articles that my AI agents bring me about a variety of things. And we're getting ready to do a seminar with a client on visions and values. And so I've really been looking at kind of what's the the cutting edge culture, leadership, those sorts of things. And I saw something today. It says, you're not a leader. You're not truly a leader until you've created one. I have never heard it that way. I have heard it where, leaders, build other leaders, but I've never heard it like almost like a legal test. Like until you have, until you've spawned a leader, you haven't, made it. And I thought that was pretty profound, because when I look at my career, I think that I've certainly had a hand, I know Stacie's had a hand in the development of people who I'd say are leaders, and that has, I didn't set out with that intention, but looking back at my career, I've seen it, and it's very rewarding. And I think if more firms paid attention to those sorts of things, which incidentally, I think is going to be more important in the age of AI, not less, they'll be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about that culture, back 20 years ago, I used to think that was a bunch of junk, but I believe in it so much now because I see the firms that are really doing good, and they got a really good culture, and people love working there. And I don't know. And I think it helps you. It's like, we actually had an incident at one of our quarterly meetings about a year ago, and we were arguing about, I ain't gonna say arguing, but we were debating. How about that? We were debating, because that's the other thing. You got to be able to debate each other and
Free exchange of ideas.
Yep. Yeah, and disagree with each other. And it's sort of like, I equivocated the way when I used to practice law. I'd get in the courtroom and fight like hell against the defense lawyer, and then I might, after we get through with the case, I might go out and have a beer with him. I mean,
Yeah,
but
you're not making it personal.
No, it's not personal. It's just,
Right.
Right.
we're doing our jobs, and we're advocating. But and then it just hit me like a light bulb. I said, well, here's one of our core values. I said, this tells us what we got to do. Everything we do is for the benefit, is for the benefit of our members, to make them better. And so look at this. I don't remember what the issue around all, but it was whether we do this or this, and this has got it'll cost us a lot more, or this, that, but to do it was going to be a really good example of a core value of everything we do is for the benefit of our members. And so that's how we decided it. That's how we made the decision. We made it real easy. And I tell people too, management, go to your core values first, because that's going to tell you 90% of the time what you should do. I don't know.
Well, and for your listeners, I mean, you and I have had countless conversations over the last few years, and I can tell the listeners that you actually believe that. Like that you practice what you preach. You really do things for the interest of your membership. That there's other organizations, I don't think that's true. I think it's all about how much money can I make and how quickly can I grow. And I know from our private conversations how much you care about these people. And I think it's reciprocated. I see it in your membership.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I really do. I do believe in it. I think the money will come. If you do that part, the money will come.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it really
agree.
will. It really will.
Yes.
I mean, I'm in it for the long game, not for the short,
Right.
And I think that's the way that's the way I did my law firm. We were all about client service. We never talked about how many $1 million verdicts we got. We just talked about, clients comes first.
And that's it. It often is and should be that the main core value for law firms is client first always.
Yeah.
Making sure if you take care of the clients, everything else will come into place. The money will come, everything. But you have to identify when those blockers are in your firm that really aren't thinking about the client first.
Yeah.
They're thinking about themselves, and ultimately that's just not the right culture.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, that I think we've had a lot of discussions, and I picked your brain and your brain, Stacie, and I like the way y'all think, and I think you got a good program, good crew. That in 2026 we're bringing y'all in as part of our faculty to help us with masterminds and trainings, and and some other good things we got going on, that some new programs we're going to launch. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited to have y'all with us. And I think I do think we share the same core values. And I think that's very important. I found over the years that when I didn't share the same core values with people, it didn't ever work out. You know what I'm saying? And I feel good about it. And I'm excited. I think you can bring new, fresh ideas. I think being in there with all the experience you've had of growing a law firm, which I know, I watched it grow, from 20 people to 300 people and become one of the biggest PI firms in North Carolina. And I'm just being honest, they couldn't have done it without you guys. I mean, just like I couldn't have done what I did without having key people. And so you've been there, you've done that. I think that's what lawyers need. And I love the fact that you tell the truth. You don't tell them what they need, what they want to hear. You tell them the truth. And I've always been, I try to do it in a nice way, but the deal is they need somebody to tell them the truth and not, they don't need yes people. They need somebody to say, listen, you're going about this wrong way. There's 2 or 3 options, but the option you're taking is clearly not it. Let's look at some other options, or you got this issue. Have you thought about this? So I'm excited about it. And
well, we're excited too.
Yeah, we're probably more excited than you, Ken. We think that in the future, technology isn't going to be a nice to have. It's every law firm is going to become a technology company, whether they like it or not. We don't just work with monster firms. That firm that you mentioned that we were at, that at one point that firm was our client, and they weren't our biggest client. We work with bigger firms than that, and we also work with firms that don't advertise at all. We've got a client firm that is kind of a preeminent boutique litigation firm in the north, and they'd never advertise, and they don't believe in advertising. So these principles work universally. You might have some listeners that say, well, I don't want to be a 300 person law firm. Stacie and I are likely to say, we agree with you. Don't be it. But it doesn't mean that the principles of efficiency and the principles of client service and the principles of technological innovation do not make your firm better wherever your firm is at. And fundamentally, the truth is, the other side has been so far ahead of us in the plaintiff's bar for decades on technology. I remember when we were debating dashboards back in the day. I mean, you and I, we've all been in the business long enough to remember that was when that was an innovative new thing. And now it's kind of that's passé. That's like yesterday's technology. It's an abacus, and so if you are not getting involved with AI in some form or fashion, or at least understand it, and then understand that how quickly the dynamics are changing, we believe the next 6 to 8 months, you're going to see tremendous disruption in the intake and case management space. And we're excited to be on the bleeding edge of your mastermind groups because they're going to get that inside knowledge directly. And we're going to be open book, open kimono in that. We're really excited about it.
Yeah. And as you know, one of not my strength is technology, but although I use ChatGPT every day, it's still, and I think this is good, bringing new blood in. And I think the deal is it's not even, you don't even need it to try to be a 300, 800-pound gorilla. You got to have it to survive. I mean, with everything, with all the, listen, this is what's happening right now. And I'm talking to lawyers. I got 2 calls in the last 2 days about lawyers that are considered selling. And I'm talking about when I sold out, I had to finance. Now there's all this equity money and different things.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're paying more than they would pay when I sold mine. I'm going to tell you that. It's and you're going to see a lot of consolidation. And so how is the guy that's solo or 3 or 4 lawyers, and they don't want to get real big, but they don't want to damn disappear either. You've got to leverage this so that you can be more efficient, so that you can spend more money on marketing or different things, or to compete. And I think it's I've said it 100 times. I'll say it again. It's like when Walmart, I remember like it was yesterday, went to my little town of 10,000 people in Dunn, North Carolina. And that was a big deal, man.
Yeah.
And all these mom and pops, they just folded up. And there was a few of them that thrived because they figured out how to fight them, how to beat them, because they could differentiate themselves and they could give them stuff that Walmart weren't willing to do. And I think the same thing's going to be with big mega firms. there's going to be stuff you can do, differentiate yourself, be more efficient, be more nimble, be more quick to make moves that the big conglomerates can't make. So I think having you guys on is going to be doing that. And we've hired another person that's coming in to get into the weeds of, how do you create an AI agent? How do you create a chat bot? I mean, how do you do this? How can you automate setting up a file? How can you automate, instead of going with these companies, how can you do it in-house? How can you do this? How can you do that? Yeah, I think with offshore and the automation stuff, whether you want to call it AI or just regular automation, it ain't a matter of doing it to get ahead of everybody. It's doing it to survive. I really think that. I might be wrong, but that's what I think.
Oh, I think history has already validated that position. I mean, if you're not growing and you're not innovating, you're going away. I mean, let's look at Blockbuster Netflix. There was, once the internet came, that completely changed Blockbuster's world. They became so obsolete so quickly. People forget, Wayne, was it Huizenga? He was a billionaire, and he fundamentally owned trash and like Blockbuster, and that just went away. And I think that's absolutely the case for firms. You talk about, firms that are considering exiting. One of the things that we also get called upon to do is you drop in there and you take a look at them and say, these are the areas in your firm that we would identify as inefficiencies and potentially areas where you could tighten up and actually increase your numbers, because the guys that come in and value your firms, they're really looking at balance sheets and spreadsheets. We're looking at something completely different. We're looking at how quickly you get that soft tissue fee in, how quickly you get a file to litigation. What are your ratios internally to get your margins up? We're seeing that a whole lot more, and it's not for everybody. Some people just want to get out of the game because they're like, hey man, I went to law school because I sucked at math and science, and I'm not trying to be a technologist. See the earlier point that we made. If you're not a technologist, then surround yourself with people who are, or bring in third parties who are, so that you can continue being the trial lawyer that you want to be or the marketeer that you want to be, but recognizing the reality that your world is changing.
Yeah, we definitely have been working with a lot more firms that have went ahead and purchased the AI products, but haven't fully adopted them, and they're not really implementing them right. We don't want firms wasting their money, when their team is not on board. They bought this product to help their team, and then nobody's using it or not using it to its fullest capability. So we want to help firms with that too. So
you guys are going to be speaking at some of our events this year. So welcome aboard. I'm looking forward to it. I think this year is going to be the year that we really break out with a lot of new things to really help lawyers take it to the next level. And I'm excited about it. Really.
We're excited too.
It's going to be a great year.
We're excited too. Yep. Great year.
So in the meantime, if somebody wants to get up with you guys, how's the best way to do it?
I think the best way is to reach out on the internet for us. Our website is mstratpartners.com, STRAT partners.com. I am a prolific email, much to Stacie and others' chagrin. So I am a pretty responsive person. We are eager to help. We don't take every client that approaches us, but I think it's true that we help every client that approaches us. Sometimes we're not the best tool in the shed for people, and we'll tell them that. I was on the phone with a guy earlier this week that we almost certainly aren't going to work with him, but we gave him enough information to kind of point him in the right direction. So mstratpartners.com is the way to get us.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I hope y'all have a great holidays, and I look forward to working with you next year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. You too.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.